All right, Pauls. This is Zach Hewlett, and we
Jack
got
Bryce.
Jack Bryce. We're here as the S.E.M podcast, the Scotland Edinburgh mission. Um, Honestly, this is an idea that I'll let Jack talk to you about, and we can kind of go from there. So, Jack, tell us a little bit of background about the podcast and simulcast and everything we're doing with this that kind of set the table.
All right. So, let's see. I guess like 6 months ago now, I got a job offer in Colorado. Um, Decided to take it, move up here, and hired Zack as my realtor. And the day of closing on our house, he says, "Hey, I've been doing this cool thing. It's like a podcast for my high school, and we just get together, reminisce, and it's been really cool. It'd be pretty cool to do something like that for the mission." And like he said that at closing, right? I bought a house the same day, and then that's all I could think about for like the next month or so. And especially, as I went to the temple here in Fort Collins, and all through the session, I was just thinking, man, if like, why not do it? Like, it'd be pretty cool to just catch up with guys we haven't seen in many years, decades.
Right.
And so I pinged you and said, let's do it, man. And so we started putting things together. And go ahead.
No, I just was going to say I applaud you for being the purveyor of us putting this together. I mean, obviously, I floated the idea, and I don't know. I've always thought it was something that would be a really cool thing for us to do. But as far as how it would all come together, I'm just excited to get this rolling and to be able to talk with you, and also, like you said, many of our brothers and sisters that we had an opportunity to meet and interact with on a different level when we lived in Scotland. So, well, just to start things off here a little bit. Um, I'm here in my basement, so if the noises are intense, it's because there's people dancing on my head. Um, so, Jack, tell us a little bit more about you and where you were 20 years ago, and maybe go through your mission call when you received your call to Scotland.
All right. So 20 years ago, man, long time ago. Um, I was excited to get my mission call. It was one of those things where, like, you mail it in and 2 weeks later on a Wednesday, it's going to come to the post office in the little town I'm from. Um, and so I got off work early, went home to hit the mailbox, and I saw, white envelope, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, grabbed it out of there, started going up the driveway to my house. And I stopped on the driveway. I was like, oh, I checked the envelope, and it was to Bishop Bryce, who was my dad at the time. And I was like, oh man, it's not for me. It's for my dad. But my call was behind it. So then I thought a little bit. I drove back to the mailbox. I put all the mail back in except my call. And I took my call home. And then my mom came home a little bit later, and she checked the mailbox, and she did the same thing. She's like driving up the road, stops. Oh, Bishop Bryce. So she gets home. She's like, hey, I'm sorry it didn't come today. And I was like, I got you. It did come.
Nice.
So we had this plan to my family was all scattered around for work and school and everything. So we met actually at the church, and I opened my mission call there just with my immediate family, and read, Edinburgh. That's where I was going. And that was like end of September. And then I shipped out February of 2004. So.
That was kind of a long time from, you said, September to February. What was kind
Probably
of your your run up? Like that was a long time. Like, tell me about your preparation
Yeah.
for getting ready to go.
I did a semester of junior college before I left. Probably the most useless schooling of my life from when I got my mission call to when I left. I just stopped being academic. But I did pretty typical things, I guess. I was like mission prep class at the Institute and just buying the gear, not really knowing what to expect. I was coming from Arizona in February to the UK. That was a climate shock.
Yeah.
But no, I think it was pretty standard stuff, really. Just excited to go.
Yeah.
It was unique.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and had you thought about Scotland as an option for where you were to serve prior to, or was it a complete out of left field shock?
So I thought, like, really what I wanted to do was go stateside Spanish speaking to get the language skills.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought, you know what? I'll either go stateside foreign speaking or I'm going to go international English speaking. That's just what I thought. So that's what it ended up being. You know, and it was a surprise to me that there was an MTC in England. So that being part of it was like, I had no idea. And all my cousins were super jealous and stuff. They all went Spanish speaking, but we have family heritage in Scotland. So being able to go to Scotland was pretty cool. And they definitely had the envy of all my cousins.
That's awesome. So tell us the areas you served in Scotland.
All right. So I served, started in Dumfries. Then I went to Cumbernauld, then up to Peterhead, down to Falkirk, and then I finished out in Glenrothes. So,
do you have a favorite area of all the areas you were in?
Oh man. No, they were all like pretty unique. And I don't know about favorite because they all different experiences in every place. I spent 9 months in my last area, Glenrothes, and the ward like there was super great. I baptized in that area. Like just enjoyed being there. It was a great time of year to be there. And so that may be my favorite, like fondest memories probably from that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like a steep learning curve for 2 years. So maybe that's why it's favorite too. They finished out after maybe learning just a little bit in the first,
Yeah.
15
Well, I'm
months.
sure 9 months there was, became a second home almost for that time period that you were there. I'm sure that was just the familiarity made a big difference for you. That's cool.
Yeah.
So catch us up. You came home from your mission and help us understand where you're at. I guess from coming home
Yeah.
to where you are now.
Oh man, got to rewind here. I just had to recall this actually for a background investigation to get my security clearance, and they're like, they make you list every address and people who knew you there for the last 10 years. Like, man, I shouldn't have moved around so much to do this. But I came home. I went back to junior college where I'd done the semester before my mission. I actually applied to BYU before I got home and was accepted, but I felt like I needed to stay at home, do some more schooling there. I found out why was my wife was there. There's no other reason. Like academically, not the greatest still, but I met my wife at the junior college. That's where she was, and we got married. So I got home February 2006, and we started dating the next year, and then got married just before I actually went to BYU. So August of 2007, coming up on the 15th wedding anniversary. So just after we got married, moved to Utah for school, did 3 years there at BYU and graduated in manufacturing engineering. And then I got a job with Lockheed Martin and moved to the Atlanta, Georgia area. We were there for a couple years, and I ended up transferring with Lockheed a couple of times. So from there, we went to East Texas, Lufkin, Texas. I think that was actually our longest stint in one place, maybe so far. Yeah, we were there for three and a half years. Then transferred up to the Dallas-Fort Worth area. With Lockheed Martin, I worked primarily on airplanes. So Dallas-Fort Worth is where they build the F-35 fighter jet. So I worked on that for a couple of years and then quit to go back to school full-time. I got a master's at the University of Michigan in supply chain management. So we went to Michigan for a year of school, which was a blast. It's like the only time since I was 5 years old that I wasn't working a job, just going to school and having fun with my family. By that time, we had 3 kids. So I've got a 10-year-old girl now. My son just turned 8 and was baptized last month. And then my youngest she's 5. Yeah, I had to think for a minute. Nice. She'll start kindergarten in the fall. That's the ages there. And so we just had we went to Michigan for a year and then decided to move home to Arizona to get the kids some grandparent time. So after school, moved there without a job, but found a job with Coca-Cola for a few months. And then I started managing some operations at Target. A couple of years at Target. We stayed in Arizona the longest, but we did move houses there. So after 2 years at Target, I went 2 years back into aerospace and defense with Honeywell in Arizona. And then most recently here in last November, I took the job up here with Ball Aerospace is where I work now as a supply chain manager. So we had to get out of the heat of Arizona. It was too hot there. And I've got a couple sisters who live up here too. So we're still near family, but out of the heat. And man, it's been great. It's been like cold water from the tap. I love it. Love it.
Yeah, for those of you who have never had mountain aquifer water, it's pretty dang good. I can attest to that. I'm drinking the same thing as Jack is. So, all right. So, going back and looking back at your time in Scotland and, kind of going into it, what were your expectations or what was your anticipation of what you hope to accomplish while you were serving the people there?
So going in, my expectation was like I'm Ammon among the Lamanites. Like people are just going to want to be baptized.
Right.
I learned that wasn't the case pretty quick. I'd say like when I first got to the mission, one of our metrics that we tracked was hours tracting. And several weeks we did, like I remember 64 hours of just tracting, just door to door.
Yeah, that's a lot.
A lot, yeah. In the winter of Scotland, so in the dark. It was cold and nobody wanted to hear our message at all. But it was great, like the camaraderie of the missionaries and things like, I don't think anybody ever told me like, hey, there's district meetings and zone meetings and like training sessions. And I knew like there was missionary study in the morning, but I didn't realize like how impactful that would be, just having a few hours a day set aside to learning about the gospel. And then also something that really helped me in my first area was running into people who not only didn't share our beliefs, but were anti our beliefs, right? And they would question me with things that I'd never heard before. The one that sticks out to me was somebody's like, I can't believe Joseph Smith was a Freemason. And I was like, what? I didn't even know what Freemasons were. And they're like, yeah, he was part of a secret society and all this stuff. And I was like, and my companion's like, yeah, he was. Oh, man. So, just learning about some of that church history that I didn't know about, and learning to, I definitely had my like Bible bashing moments and realizing that didn't work at all. I think we even had some of those when I was companions with you. So
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No apology. No
they
apology
called me out
necessary.
by name, right? We're walking down the street and hey, is one of you Elder Bryce? I heard you were coming to this area. So
interesting.
But yeah, so I guess my expectation was just like I was not Ammon along the way. I wish I could have chopped off some arms, at times.
Yes, indeed.
But and when I reported to the High Council when I got back, I told them like frankly, my mission was hard, and I certainly hope it wasn't the best 2 years of my life. I can say now that it was not the best 2 years of my life. It was like probably the best 2 years for me at that time. But if that had been the best 2 years of my life, like it was a pretty crappy life. Nobody wants to go door to door 64 hours a week and say this is the best thing ever.
Yeah.
But
agreed, 100%.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, obviously, you laid out the expectations pretty well, and some of your challenges. What was one of your most challenging moments that you can recall on your mission?
Probably right when I got to my last area. I was kind of at a stage of my mission where I was wondering, like, man, what am I doing here? Like, I've been trying super hard to share the gospel, but nobody's listening. The area I was in before that, I kind of went through like a downhill part of my mission, I guess. A lot of, I don't know what was like, just a rough patch of mission, and then I got whitewashed out of that area. So I felt kind of like, oh man, I failed at that, right? But I came into a great ward. They were like on fire with missionary work. They were having weekly missionary council meetings with everybody from the ward and providing team teachers. It was the Kirkcaldy ward, so there were Kirkcaldy elders as well. Another set of missionaries there with us. And it was a mission friend of mine, Elder Bass. So Russ Bass was there, and that helped, but then it was just hard for a while, and I remember praying like I need something to change, and I don't know if it changed the way that I expected, but my companion was Elder Noble, and we were at a district meeting one day, and we got a phone call. They said, hey, let me talk to Elder Noble. They told him, you're getting transferred. Emergency transfer. We got to get another missionary out of another area, and they're swapping with you. So he swapped with Elder Parmenter from, I think he was in Sterling at that time. But not a normal transfer, but I got a new companion, and kind of got a fresh start from there. I guess things picked up. So I served with Elder Parmenter the last 5 months of my mission. It was a long companionship, long area, and a lot of support from our church community there. But that ended up being really good for me. And we met a lady named Grace Rankin who joined the church, and that was awesome. Like great experiences with her and the ward and fellowshipping. And it strengthened my testimony. I felt like I was really able to apply the things that I'd learned through my mission in teaching her, answering the concerns that she had, just knowing, I guess, how to be a good missionary at that point and really lead her to the waters of baptism, help her to feel the Spirit. Those things that I knew, like it wasn't, no longer was it Elder Bryce trying to be Ammon. It was like Elder Bryce just being a missionary, facilitating the Spirit so that it could do its job, converting. But that was a rough patch at the beginning of that area, and then to come out of it and finish on a high note with somebody joining was awesome.
No, that's a great experience, and I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, for those that are listening, I'm sure that they're aware, but if they are not, the average number of baptisms per missionary during the time we were there was about one person.
Yeah, it's like
one
0.
or two people.
Yeah.
And so, that's a big accomplishment for you and obviously for her, and being able to recognize the steps necessary and to do the things that she needed to be there. So that's awesome.
I definitely learned on the mission that the number of people who join the church isn't important. Like that statistic of baptisms per missionary or whatever, like I beat the average, but I don't feel like that's anything to do with me or any reflection on anybody who was a missionary and didn't baptize anybody. I found out, so growing up, my dad didn't really talk about his mission.
Mm-hmm.
I knew he served. I knew he went served around the Chicago area, and that's pretty much all I knew. But I found out while I was on my mission that my dad never baptized anybody on his mission. He actually had his first baptism while I was on my mission, and he was the bishop in Arizona. He baptized a lady in the ward there, and that was the first convert baptism that he had performed in his life. And I thought, wow, here's my dad, who I look up to, incredible guy, great servant in the church, and had a very similar experience to me, but in a different place. And yeah, I definitely learned it doesn't matter. That number doesn't matter at all. Like my cousin who was in Guatemala and getting talked to by his mission president about only baptizing 100 people in a month, and then we the same time we had a zone conference, and our mission president was giving us a hard time about only baptizing 100 for the year. So it was, that statistic as far as missionary work, this doesn't really matter. You're called to serve somewhere, and there's people prepared or not, but that's less to do with the person or the missionary serving than everybody has their agency. So I still tell people, they're like, oh, how was it to serve in Scotland? That's really unique. I'm like, Parley P. Pratt and those guys went through and they cleaned everybody out who wanted to join the church 200 years ago.
Yeah.
And I went back to glean the field, whatever it was,
right,
was left after that giant harvest. So, and I'm that's my ancestry too in Scotland that got converted back in the 1800s. So I'm grateful for that too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, opportunity for you to kind of go back and return the favor of sorts, type of thing, which is cool.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm sure you've been thinking about this in the run up to our conversation tonight, but what's one of your, I won't limit it to one, but tell us some of your favorite memories from the mission, whether it's with specific companions or funny moments. I mean, share some of those. So I'd love to hear those.
Sure. So there's definitely some highlights in there to be way more than the time we have here to cover them all. And I even thought about, how you picked up as we were preparing for this, Zack got his missionary journal out and was looking through some stuff. I thought about doing that, and I'm like, no, I'll just get lost in it. Like, there's too much.
Yeah.
So, but one thing that really stands out to me was when like first area is getting discouraged, right? Because of how different it was to what I was expecting. And the APs came in for the exchange day that they did with all the new elders. And Elder Howard and we handed out, the day that he was there, we handed out, I think, like 16 Books of Mormon. And I was just like, holy cow, like that relit my fire, just to have an awesome day like that. And one of the people that we gave a Book of Mormon to didn't like, they continued as an investigator, but like became a pretty good friend, like a good place to go and share testimony. Didn't ever keep their commitments like they should, but ended up being a great person to, as a greenie, to try out teaching the gospel and really having some good discussions there. So that was cool. Like we had that great day, and then it led to a great friendship with someone. And then I learned a lot from Elder Karish. I was his last companion. And he is an incredible guy. I hope we get him on this podcast, because I think his story is amazing. Yeah, definitely. He already told me he wants to see, like, if we really mess this up, he doesn't want to be a part of it. So
great fence sitter.
But yeah, so that was like first experience there. And then I baptized a lady in that area named Jane Wheatley. If anybody comes across her, I guess, while they listen to this, I lost contact with her like in the time of my mission. She moved out of that area and I lost contact with her. So I'd be really interested to know if anybody knows where Jane Wheatley's at. But that was with Elder Livingston, and then I was being replaced by Elder Osmond, and man, there was a frenzy in the ward of like, oh, Elder Osmond, like nobody was sad to see me go. Like, Donnie Osmond's son is coming, so see ya. But that was
no love lost for Brandon Osmond at all. Like, that was one of the most unique aspects of serving in Scotland at that time.
I didn't even know who Donnie Osmond was until I was in the MCC with his son. So
yeah, exactly. There you go.
And then moving on to Cumbernauld. Cumbernauld is like, I think it's ranked number 2 ugliest city in Europe or something. It's really bad.
Can you find that statistic for us and tell us where we can find
I'll
that?
have to cite it, right? I'll have to find the. I think anybody who's been there though will be like, yeah, it's only number 2. I thought it'd be number 1. But 6 months there, and it's like a concrete jungle. I was down the block from a couple murders there. It was just unique experience. And so highlights there, I guess, were more like the companions that I had there. I ended up meeting a lot of people in that area, like my district leader, companions and stuff that I ended up serving around a lot through my mission. Like they kind of traveled with me, just in the same zone, same district, that sort of thing. So that was pretty cool. And so like a good example there would be Elder Grant, who was the zone leader. Ended up being an assistant to the president and like just a great missionary. We've got to get him on to tell the story about how he almost
Rory,
left.
get on here.
Yep, Rory Grant. So, yeah, and then going up to Peterhead, man, that was cold, right? That's where we met.
Yep.
So I was 6 weeks up there, celebrated my first Christmas on the mission, and then shortly after that, you came out from Utah, and I didn't realize like how adjusted I was to the climate until you were my companion. And Zach had this like Land's End puffy jacket. You know, it's like a sleeping bag that he wore everywhere.
All the
He was
time.
freezing
Yes.
the whole time. And I was laughing because at that point I'd been out a year, and I thought like it's not too bad. Definitely was cold. Don't get me wrong. Like we're out there knocking doors at night, and your hand going numb and all
Yeah.
that. But
Well, I
we
think the biggest thing with Peterhead, for those of you listening that have never been to Peterhead, it is literally on the point jutting out into the North Sea,
yeah
on the northern and furthest eastern point in Scotland. So we were literally hanging off of Scotland, and Peterhead is right there on the sea. So it's not like there was any lack of wind that was cutting through every bone of our body.
yes, super humid, super cold, windy. First time I experienced rain and snow coming up. I still am not sure how that was possible, but you'd be walking with an umbrella and the rain is hitting you in the face
Yeah.
coming up.
Bless the wind.
Yeah, and I think since we're gonna be regulars on this, right? I'm gonna save most of my companion stories for when my companions join us. But since you were my companion, we'll go through some more detailed highlights of when we served together.
All right. Like
Definitely a highlight for me was driving around up there. I was telling Zach the other week, it was like we were rally car partners, right? Like I was the co-pilot calling out where the speed cameras were, and we were setting records between Peterhead and Fraserburgh. So
oh yeah.
it was a blast.
Well, and also, set the precedence too that what was it, 2 weeks after I got there, maybe even a week
Yeah.
after is when your driver's license expired. And all of a
Yep.
sudden you're like, all right, here's the keys, have at it. And I was terrified, first and foremost. And then secondly, I was exhausted most days. So the fact that we had such a large area and we had to drive a car in order to get from place to place more often than not was a true miracle that we made it there. Because I remember, you referencing my Land's End puffy coat. I wouldn't take that thing off to get into the car. And so when I'm sitting in there with the heat full blast, it was as if I was in the nicest, comfiest sleeping bag in a warm little car, but I had the wheel. And so
Yeah.
that was a little bit challenging.
So little car was right. Like I don't know how we fit in that car. If you don't know, I'm 6'6", Zach is 6'5". We both weigh like well over 200 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
And we are in for people in the United States, it's Geo Metro.
Yeah. The
tiny car.
Vauxhall, what was the
Corsa.
model? The what?
Corsa. Vauxhall
The Corsa. That's right. My gosh.
With all 0.9 liters of engine roaring, carrying us.
It was a race car, though. We made it a race car. I mean, you were so low to the ground, you couldn't help it.
Yeah. So some of my favorite stories from the mission actually are about serving with you, and it's our size, right? So you're in your big puffy jacket on top of being huge. I'm in my missionary coat as well. And it's getting like we're there in the middle of winter. So it's getting dark at like 2 p.m, and we're out tracting. Literally, we would knock on the door and old ladies would scream when they open the door. They'd be like, when we'd have to apologize, like, hey, what? Or I remember one time somebody's like, come in. So we step inside and they're like, Dad, the police are here. And I'm like, no, we're not the police. And then they're like, get out.
I remember that. Oh gosh.
But that was like, I feel like that was pretty regular that people, like, we took up the whole doorway. I can't blame them for being terrified, answering the door in the dark, and two giants.
We started staggering each other. Like one person would be at the door and the next person would be behind them, so that it wasn't as intimidating, because we really did. We filled the entire doorway and then some.
Yeah. and that was great. So the people in that area were great too. It's a small ward up there, but people were so nice. And going to church at the Mint Law Academy, we saw the little flyer on the board for they were playing basketball, I think on like Wednesday nights, and we're like, yeah, we're gonna go to that. And we went, and everybody thought that Zack was like straight out of the NBA 2000 N64. Like they'd never seen anybody who could play basketball at all. So when you have two guys over 6 foot show up in Scotland, it might as well have been like Shaq and Kobe stepping onto the court. Like they were in awe. And then the guy who ran that little game or whatever saw us out tracking one day and almost wrecked his car because he didn't know, or at least he didn't realize that we were missionaries like full time.
That's right. I remember that.
Hit the curb, and yeah, that was hilarious. That was a highlight for me of my whole mission. Just serving with a huge guy who, we scared people. That's
Yeah, for sure. Oh man, good memories. And I remember, like you said, going to church at the academy. I mean, they had a plot for a building, and I think it got built by the time I left, like by the time I went home. It was really close if it hadn't been completely completed by January of 2007.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a different experience altogether. Just showing up at, the local school, and, they had their stuff set up, and that's how they did it. And it was very humbling for me anyway. But yeah, they were devout people, and I remember what was the name of the family? There was one brother that, because I was new, he always tried to get me to say the wrong words so that he could catch me up on my Scottish lingo very quickly. And it made a few mistakes, so that was fun.
Yeah, there was a few families in that ward for sure who kind of helped us out, right? Like they were always willing to open their homes. I think we were fed decently up there for how far long the ward was. Like a huge ward geographically, and actually we could only drive to the farthest parts of the ward like one time per month or a miles allotment. So that was great. And then of course, like we went to every castle ruins we could find up there, which was really cool. Definitely some of the best ruins I've been to on my mission or otherwise. It was really neat. Love Slane's Castle. We were out there one time on a P-Day, and it was like super windy. We were having a good time in the wind. Then we found out that it like literally was hurricane force winds, and we probably should not have been out there on the edge of the cliff. But
yeah,
we were protected and had a good time.
Yeah, Slane's Castle became a favorite for me. That a great place, so much fun.
Yeah. And then, so probably towards the end, we found out that they would be closing down our area, right, for a little while. But at the same time, we met Sheila, who was a lady. It was kind of like the golden investigator you hear about, who'd been praying for something, and then we knocked on her door, and she invited us in. We were able to teach her only a couple lessons before we left, but she did join the church afterwards, right?
Yeah, she did.
The zone leaders continued teaching her. So that was a great way to end, like, training you, and to end in that area. Like, definitely awesome to have somebody to teach.
Yeah, I remember the day that we found Sheila. We did our traditional thing where we'd pick a street after praying about it, and then I remember she lived on like a circle, so no matter what, we were going to hit every door going around either direction. And I remember we decided to go the long way, coming back around, and she was at the end. And I'll never forget the power that was present as we were kneeling in her living area, and she said that she wanted to pray, and it was just silent, and I don't know, you could cut the spiritual nature of that room with a knife. It was so cool. And yeah, that was an awesome experience.
Yeah, powerful moment for sure, for all of us. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I learned too on my mission is it's always the last house. Always the last house that you go to. Like you're tracking all day, all week, all month, whatever. It's always the last one. Like
Yeah.
when you look at your companion and one of you's like, let's just go home because it's cold. But they say, nah, there's just one more. That's the one that it is. And that was definitely the case with Sheila, right? Like all the way around the arc, all the way back in the last house that we went
Yes,
to.
indeed. Yes, indeed.
Even so, my last area, Grace, that was baptized, she was the last house. In fact, we were tracking. It was late at night. Elder Parmenter and we had knocked on her neighbor's door, and he invited us in, and we had a great discussion. Like it was one of those discussions where at the end you're like, hey, if you pray about this and you know that it's true, will you commit to joining the church? And he was like, yeah, I'll do it. So we walked out, and I'm like, man, that's a great one to end on. It's close enough. We can walk back to the flat from here. And but Elder Parmenter, I think, was like, I'll just do one more. Like one more door. And that last door is where I met Grace. So
wow.
We ended up going back to the guy that was great. He was still actually interested, but his wife vetoed us. So we ended up teaching Grace though, and it was that last door. So that was probably, that'd be an interesting, like if I had a slogan or a theme for my personal mission, that's probably, I guess, what it would be: the last door. Always the last door. Or that's one awesome. More door.
I love it. So as far as what's one of your most memorable stories that just makes you laugh every time you think about it?
Besides the ones we already talked about with the lady screaming at the door, I think, oh man, it makes me laugh. Probably in that last area, we saw an advertisement for a visiting minister at another church. And we went to the meeting where this guy was going to be on a Sunday night. And he called us out in the audience. He's like, you see these elders down here? He was visiting from Africa. He had a thick accent that wasn't Scottish.
Right.
You see these elders down here? They know what it's all about. He started like bragging about us and the good work that we were doing in the country that he was from. And it was one of those services too where you could say amen throughout the service, which I love because then you can say amen to the parts you agree with and you don't have to say anything to the ones you don't. But like that, I look back, I'm like, that was great to go to a different church and have the visiting minister, tell everybody in the congregation what great guys these elders were visiting there. There's 4 of us. Awesome. So it's pretty funny.
I love it,
man.
Well,
there's a whole flood coming back now. It was like just memories, man. 2 years is packed. It's a life within a life.
Yeah.
Of memories there.
No, I completely agree. It really was a life. We have like the phases of life we go through, and that was a 2-year phase where life was just a little bit different and a little bit outside of our norms, but it was so good. It was really good. All right. Well, is there you got a list of any elders or sisters that you're hoping to hear from that you'd like to shout out or call out
Yeah.
here on the pod?
Let me think about this for a minute. I want all my companions to get on here eventually. They know who they are, right? And I've called out some of them already, but that would be great to hear from all of them. Most of them I have contact with in some way, so I'm going to be reaching out and asking for them to join, inviting them on.
Love it.
And I will say I've already, like, in preparation for this, Zack and I both reached out to some missionaries we knew, and the response was very positive. So I think we're going to have a lot of good conversation here and a lot of people on that. I don't feel like I need to call anybody out specifically because we're going to get this thing rolling and we're going to have a lot of people joining. I'm sure like there'll be a waiting list, so sign up now. All right, we've got a website for it, 51spylaw.com. You should be able to remember that.
That's right.
Should be familiar.
For those of you who forgot.
Should be familiar to all of you. Yeah. So I'm not going to call anybody out by name right now, but we'll give people that opportunity as they come on to call people out.
All right. Obviously, the majority of the people that will come on to this conversation will have served under President Sister Vriens. Tell us your favorite memory of Sister Vriens at the pulpit at Zone Conference. I'm sure we all have the same memory.
Something that really took me by surprise was the pig nose when I got there. And I bought a belt with a buckle that has a pig face on it.
Did you really?
That reminds me of Sister Vriens, and that the pig gave its all.
Oh man. Her and her little bonnet outfit and the pig nose. I mean, my goodness. I don't. Obviously, I wasn't in anyone else's flat, understanding like the level of messiness, but I don't know. I never had a spot check on my mission. Did you have them come over and check your flat to make sure that it was clean?
Not President and Sister Vriens. I did have senior couples come by.
Okay.
To check.
Yeah, I'd never had any of that. Obviously, I was grateful, but at the same time, I didn't feel like our flats were ever too messy,
Yeah.
But anyway.
There were some slobs out there. Some pigs living in the sty for sure.
I guess I was just one of the fortunate ones that didn't have. Cause I'm a pretty clean person. Good. But yeah, I got lucky. Well,
then, yes, favorite memory of President Vriens. Something that I carried with me after that was like every time President Vriens would see you, right, like interviews, church, wherever, he would say, "You're the best. You're the best, elder." Like, and that was always positive coming from him. And I thought about like the impact that had as my leader coming to me. I knew he told everybody, "You're the best."
Yeah.
But just that sort of thing, even as a manager now, I try to carry that to my people. Like, there's going to be enough people in the world telling you that you're doing something wrong or not as good as you could. But as your leader, I can tell you, you're the best. You're doing great. It's going to be a good day. Things like that. Just the positivity that came from President Vriens every time I saw him. "You're the best, elder," with a big hug. I love that.
Yeah, he did. He definitely did give some great hugs. That's for sure. And I agree. The positive reinforcement was really something that you needed every time you were able to see him, whether it was, interviews or, mission conferences or even in between. But it was always positive. Like, and I know that his role in the mission, I don't want to call it a job, but it was, his role was truly to be the hype man for all of us so that we could continue to go out and put in the work every day, even though it wasn't the easiest work to do. It was a necessity, and he was very, very good at that. So I can agree with you big time. Well, is there anything else that from the mission, or even just since then, um, in your life, that you've recalled a moment being in Scotland and been grateful of the fact that you were there for that period of time you were?
I think I came home a little traumatized from the experience because it was so radically different from what I was expecting. And anytime you tell somebody like, "Hey, where'd you serve your mission?" I served in Scotland. Everybody's like, "Oh, wow, awesome."
Right.
And to say like being a missionary there was actually really hard. Um, but I love the experience. Like, I don't know anything else in my life that's been that hard that I love so much. Um, just, and I think about it almost every day. There's something that I think about from Scotland, a person, a memory, a place, even like in my personal study now of the gospel, I reflect a lot on the people that I met there, the things that I learned there, and how it applies to now, is just incredible, right? I do not regret serving a mission and going to Scotland for 2 years, which I'm. I think the day I stepped off the plane getting home, I wasn't sure that that was going to be the case. Um, but as I've grown and gone through more life now, had more experiences, I'm very grateful to have had that unique experience. Not many missionaries go to Scotland. It's a select group.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I would say that our group was even more special with the fact that it was the Scotland Edinburgh mission. There wasn't the bleed over that there is now. I've come across a few people that have served in the Scotland Ireland mission, and I'm not knocking it at all, but you know, when people serve in Ireland, it's a different experience than serving in Scotland. And so um, I can agree with you that it has a huge impact on who I am every single day. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yep.
All right. Well, we can wrap this up. Really appreciate Jack taking some time to share his experience and being able to reflect on some of the fond memories as well as the challenges. And um, we want to invite all of you that serve there, or I wouldn't be opposed to hearing from people who live there currently. Some of our favorite people in Scotland. If you're up for a conversation with us, we'd love to talk. You can share your favorite memories, share some of your reflections on missionaries, whether in your home or in your wards or in your branches. We'd love to connect with more of those people. So if you are interested in being on the podcast, send us an email. The email is fairly simple. It's SEM podcast at 51spylaw.com, and send us an email. And like Jack said, I would imagine that we'll start getting quite a few people that will start stacking them up. We'll schedule out some time over the coming weeks and months and get this thing rolling. But we really appreciate your support, and we're excited to reconnect with many of you, hopefully as many as are listening. It really is going to be an awesome journey, and this is just the first step. Jack, are you excited?
I am excited. There's no deadline on this. Like we're not planning to finish this up anytime. So we're just going to keep rolling with it as long as we can and have a good time with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, until next time, thanks for joining us.
Yep. Bye.